Welcome to part 3 of the Intro to Poetry course. We are now going to indulge in my all-time favorite poem, Birches by Robert Frost. And I think the best way to do that is to have him read you his poem off of my computer, recorded on my phone. And I hope it goes well. All right. Make yourself comfortable. It's about 3 minutes.
When I see birches bent to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break. Though once they're bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterward, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have had some boy bend them as he went out or in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches.
So that is Robert Frost's Birches. Let me close this before it plays another video. Yeah. If you're anything like me, you probably need to listen to that a few times, which I understand. So take your time. Don't, when we talked about not having to understand a poem right away, I think it's important to acknowledge when maybe you need to spend more time with a poem. So do it, the other thing I'd like you to do before we get into the discussion, and I'll give you some time to do it, is open up a window on your computer and search Robert Frost Birches and pull it up. The first one that will come up is probably the Poetry Foundation, unless my algorithms are very different than yours. And they have a copy there. It's really easy. So go ahead and wait till that's in front of you. Even better, if you want to pause this and print it out and mark it up and think about the poem on your own, that would be great too. It's totally up to you. I know I would probably just be anxious to get on with it and see what Robin has to say. So, God, I just love this poem. So, I can talk about it on a few of the levels that we discussed. There's notice there are no line breaks. The line lengths are a little bit scattered. but consistently so. It's like a pattern in nature almost. The kind of orderly disorder, orderly chaos of it. And also really mimics a conversation. And I think, well, he reads it in a somewhat haughty way, but there's also in terms of the way that the words work, it's very conversational, it's very intimate. He's talking to you. When I see this, I think, especially that part, but I was going to say, before Truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, he breaks the poem there a little bit and says, well, I was going to say this to you, my friend. So there's this welcoming, when I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. So the first 4 lines, it's like, hey, man, I was thinking about this. And I was and what I would love to be thinking about this is that it was some boy swinging them. This is my favorite kind of conversation. Someone come up to me and be like, when I was thinking about those birch trees and what I was imagining and imposing on them. And then it's like there's 2 parts to Robert Frost. So that's this sort of practical part that's starting in a conversation, and then he moves into the very almost scientific, as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morn after a rain. So he wanted to muse about the boy, and then he moves into okay, it's ice storms. I get it. It's not what I wanted, but that's what it is. So now I'll talk to you a little bit about ice storms, right? Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heap of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. See how metered and choppy that is? I mean, you can't read that without kind of going da-da, 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 da-da. Such heaps and this heaps. It's so, again, with the sound like E-A-P, heaps of broken glass. Like the glass to sweep away. At this point we're Shakespearean, we're like in a play. He just marches into it like that little boy marching into the actuality of ice storms, being responsible for these turned down trees. Soon the warmth makes me, it's great. You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. What? It's like every time he tries to move into the scientific, he becomes this child again with his wild imagination and also this sort of heartbroken old man, right? He has to go into the heavens, and he has to collapse the dome of the heavens. They're dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. Oh, right? You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves again. We have the collapse of heaven followed by these dragged down, weighted trees who can never quite right themselves again. I mean, now he was flirting with you a little bit, and now he's like, well, come right on into my soul. Like I said, there's nothing in a poem that is not serving the sort of inner, real drive purpose of the poem. So if he's talking about a trees being bowed down by ice after the domes of heaven had fallen, there's no way that's not about the human spirit, right? That's not just about trees, my friends. They never right themselves. God, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Bowed so low for so long, they never right themselves. Oh. So now he's sort of confessed. He's shown himself. He's put his cards on the table. This is me. Bowed down. The inner dome of heaven has fallen. And this is where it's helpful to know a little bit of biography. Robert Frost is one of those beautifully tragic poets. He lost his whole family one after the other. Several children. and his wife, and was not much recognized as a poet until his later years. So like just this hard life, sprinkled with nothing but misfortune. So, understand that as you're reading these poems. This isn't a man, sitting there in his semi-average life trying to connect to something deep through his poetry. No, this is a man in the depths, trying to crawl out by writing some poetry. It has to be authentic. It has to come from somewhere real, and this certainly does. This had to be written sort of like Emily Dickinson. Years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. He's giving this beautiful counterpoint, this beautiful levity. You've got this weighted man who can't correct himself, and then he brings this through that image. So you've got this bent tree bowing to the ground, and then you may see their trunks arching in the wind years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground. So the leaves come back, after the ice storm, the leaves come back. The trees gain a kind of levity. We go from the old to the old and hunched over into the young girls on hands and knees. So we've transformed ourselves from this to that. And part of what's happening here too, remember the manipulation of the reader. You've got to give them a little bit of green leaves and golden hair for a little while before we go back into the depths of despair, right? So we have this childlike moment. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, so he quickly breaks up that levity and takes us when truth is capitalized. It's almost violent, if you look at it in the line. When truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm. So he didn't want any of that. I mean, he still used it to tell you about himself, but he wanted to go to fantasy, and he's telling you, I'm a poet, and I want to put my poetry, my idea of poetics into the world. I want the world to be a poem for me that expresses these inner processes, this inner world. So when I look at the tree, when I look at the birches, this is what I want them to be, because that's what I want to talk to you about. And then truth came in, I guess it's this masculine we talked about. If you did the access and the unconscious, it's interesting because truth here almost makes me think of, it's like Robert Frost's own animus, which is the animus is actually the feminine, the masculine in a woman's mind, right? Who comes in with criticality and truth and rationality, and it's kind of like, oh, you're too out there. So I feel like this is his, there's some animus in him constantly breaking in, although he labels it she as well. It's so interesting. It's like his feminine counterpart is this, perhaps because he's a poet, she's become a bit more of an animus. So when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them. So he's so calm now. So he's brought you through this orchestral description of the ice and the women on hands and knees, which is his way of poeticizing the truth anyways. But then he goes back and says, well, anyways, that's not the tangent I wanted to go on. Here's the real metaphor. Those tell you a little bit. He's like, okay, I'm telling you I'm old and things have been taken from me, and I'm telling you I'm capable of levity and I'm capable of lightness. So he's told you those things, and now he goes, but here's what I really wanted to tell you. And then he talks about this young boy, right? I should prefer to have some boy bend them down as he went in and out to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself summer or winter and could play alone. Well, that's him. And he goes, it's great. He goes on to say it. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them. And not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise, to the top branches, climbing carefully, with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward feet first with a swish. kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. And so I dream of going back to be. I mean, that whole section. So he just takes you right into his childhood self and what spirit did he have and what did he try? And again, you see him going out to each tree and pushing them to their capacity. It's like he almost accounts for an inevitability related to all of his loss. He's like, I had to know such love that of course I have to feel such loss. Beautiful. So then he admits much more plainly, okay, I'm writing this because it's me, and I was once the swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. You very famously know his nothing gold can stay phrase. Robert Frost is really, really known for his consideration of the impermanence of perfection, the impermanence of that joyful. I think part of why he loves nature so much is that it's something that blooms, dies. That's the experience of his life over and over again. Real love. You can tell, real love. He wouldn't dream of this thing from before if it wasn't really, really, really good. And here he is on the other side of loss. So when he says, so was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. So I dream of going back to be. He's taken us into now. Now he's dreaming of then. And now he's telling you, it's when I'm weary of considerations, and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twigs having lashed across it open. Notice how he's slowing us down. I mean, we got heavy here. Like he's just addressing us straight on. He's not using faraway metaphor anymore, or analogies of boys. He is talking to you in real time. Oh, sorry about my neighbors there. Where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping. And see how slow that is? I mean, compared to earlier when we had the girls on hands and knees, it's like the inner dome of heaven had broken. I mean, you can't say inner dome of heaven had broken. You can't say that slow, the inner dome of heaven. You can't. Heaven lifts you up, right? Heaven, broken. But now we've got, broken across it, and one eye is weeping from the twigs having lashed across it, open. And then here's the home run. I'd like to get away from earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish, and snatch me away, not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree, and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk towards heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. So all that, and as much as he even can't quite bear to be on earth, I'd like to leave earth a while. Well, why? I mean, why would you want to leave something unless it was unbearable? But may no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. He knows that, and he chooses it. And one could do worse than this. He chooses love and he chooses loss. And he brings us in so brilliantly to this poem. I mean, if he had started it at the end with just a plain old address, he wouldn't have brought us in through an experience of the sort of permutations of his consciousness, moving out from science and metaphor to straight address, and to, it's mastery. It's real mastery, and he does this for us. He does this. He crystallizes his own consciousness so that we can take part in it. And, and the real, what happens for me anyways, is I feel less alone in the world. I'm sitting here in someone else's consciousness. And that's powerful. And if you ever wonder why poetry, really, this is why. There's nothing more intimate than this, especially when a poet has really figured out how to do it. You have to know it's such a skill. But when you can turn your consciousness into words and give them to someone in a memorizable musical form, what greater gift is there? And this is why I'm so passionate about really leaving space only for those poets who are doing this, who are giving us something like this, and practice until you can, and become a person who knows these things about themselves and has something to share, because that's the stuff that we need.